The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Keep your mission on your mind and your mind on your mission. This is Mission Minded with Michael Coleman.
Oh, man, whenever I get a chance to do Mission Minded, two wonderful things happen. First of all, Michael Coleman is one of my best buddies. I got to know him really well over the last 3 or 4 years doing Tony Kurre Radio, so I get a chance to catch up with him for 30 minutes, which is a win-win. And the second thing is you get to listen to the show Mission Minded here, where you keep your mind, your mission your mind, and hopefully you learn something. Of course, the man is an expert in non-for-profits. He was with the Jimmy Hill Mission, now, of course, the CEO at the Montgomery Food Bank, and he joins us right now. This show airs every single Monday through Friday at 10 a.m. What a great way to start your day, regardless of what you're doing. Get on there and check us out. And, of course, anytime you want to listen to the show, and you can't listen at 10 o'clock, first-run shows here on TKR, you can go to our Spotify or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast, Tony Kurre Radio Podcast, and listen to Mission Minded. Michael, how you been, man? What's going on?
Doing great. Just loving the new position, and but this, with everything else, has a lot of great opportunities, and there's always some unique challenges anytime you're going into an organization. So at some point during the show, we want to touch on that and just share with the audience, just because I'm trying to make this as practical as possible. And these are real practical things that everybody will have to deal with.
You know, it's interesting, too, because we're going to be coming up on September here, and I can't believe that, with Labor Day and, of course, the end of summer unofficially, which is crazy because the summer has just flown by. And I was thinking about, you know, we talked about nutritional value of the food that you provide to people, 35 different counties in the great state of Alabama. And you're like, you want people to have cookies and snack cakes and things like that. And it's not all, you know, grains and bananas and fruits and vegetables, but like popsicles. And I'm thinking to myself, it's summertime, and I've got like 4 boxes of popsicles I need to get through, because in wintertime, I ain't going through no popsicles. How does it change as the weather changes in your industry or in Feeding America or the Montgomery Food Bank from season to season? Because obviously some things don't grow during September, some things do. Do you have to bring things in from across the country? How does that work?
Yeah, so produce is always a challenge because if you get something out of season, then there has to be storage. And what you want to try to do is move your inventory all the time. We are just, for instance, we've just put in about another month, it'll be operational, an 8,000 square foot freezer and cooler.
Wow.
And it's our 4th freezer on site, and which will enable us to be able to get a lot of protein and stuff, because sometimes it's really interesting how the channels work. You know, we've already been told that with the food, with inflationary cost and with the food shortages, the grain shortages, all that kind of stuff, just the challenges around the world, that the supplies are not quite as plentiful as they are. So we're fighting for more and more stuff. And so when you're trying to decide, hey, I'm trying to make sure that the food that I give is as healthy as possible. Now, of course, it's very interesting because some people have the perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. Why do I want to put a bunch of healthy food towards somebody if they're not going to eat it? Mm-hmm. So you're trying to find the right balance. I know that Michelle Obama, when she did the school choice program or the school lunch program, you know, she received a lot of criticism. The intention is to help people eat healthier, put healthier things in their body. The problem is you're always balancing. Well, if it doesn't taste good, if it's not something they're used to, they're not going to eat it. So you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, let's just give them junk so that they'll eat that. So we're always trying to understand how our clients give them the best choice, but also give them the right education we can. One of the things that I discovered years ago working with the poverty population, and when I say this, I like to reiterate to my audience, you know, that's not a code for any sort of race. You know, there's Black poverty, there's white poverty, there's Hispanic poverty, and there's certain things that apply to all people in poverty. And one of those is they simply do not find use in a food label. We think that would be a good thing for people because they can make better choices and better decisions. But when there's food scarcity, you don't get a lot of debate as to, well, is this healthy, is this not healthy? That's something that we in the middle class, when we're in the grocery store, we may make decisions on, well, this has too much fat or this has too much salt. So a lot of this up front is we're trying to help them out. We're trying to educate them and empower them with that decision making. But in the meantime, we're just trying to help give them healthier options to be able to choose from. But it's a real challenge because we don't want to give out food that's going to be wasted. So again, constantly trying to find that right balance.
Yeah, well, I mean, the old saying, beggars can't be choosers, and it's amazing because I've been blessed, obviously, during my life, and I know you have, and most of us have been, that we haven't had to go to a food bank, and so you are going to eat what you have. And sometimes when things get really, really tight, you find out that the bad food's usually the cheapest, and the stuff that's good for you is the most expensive stuff. But how do you do you specifically deal with families that are using your services? Because I know as a parent, and you do as well, there are persnickety kids that won't eat things. They don't like their vegetables, and sometimes they don't like all their fruits. How do you deal with that to ensure that when you give food out, it is being used?
Yeah, so this is one of the things that I think that we have the right focus on because it's already a very undignified process. Like I've given you scenarios before of people who've lost their job and maybe they're in poor health and they can't go out and get a job anymore. They're used to, they've been middle class their whole life, and now just because of life circumstances, there's no one necessarily to blame, but they just find themselves needing assistance and food assistance. So it's already a very difficult hit on their pride and their self-worth just to stand in a food line. It can be very humiliating to them. And so one of the things we try to emphasize, because again, just for the audience, to orient the audience, a food bank is contracted with Feeding America. There's 200 in the nation, and every county in the United States is up under one of the 200 food banks. But we have agencies or pantries, if you will, and that could be a church, that could be other 501c3s, who actually take the food that we distribute out to them, and then they actually feed the clients. So we don't do direct feeding, we do indirect feeding. But one of the things we have to do is help clients, help agencies be able to give the best experience, because they're there because they're a church in their community and they want to help those in need. And so lots of times we do things without even really being aware of it. Sometimes you can look at people and treat them as if they're a secondhand citizen. And so you make something that's very degrading already even more humiliating, to the point that somebody says, well, I'm not going back to that. I already feel bad enough myself, and then they make you feel bad. So a lot of the ways that they've come up with to combat that is try to make that process more dignified, but also give them choice. And so I think your more effective pantries will do what's called choice. So imagine this. If you have the space and you have cans of food up on the shelves. Now, lots of times it's pre-bagged and you're just giving a bag of food, or you're giving certain pounds of food. Mm-hmm. And you get home and let's say half of that's not something that you eat, you may be allergic to, whatever it is, and you throw it away. So that's waste, and we're trying to cut that out. So one of the ways is you come in and a client actually pushes a cart through just like they were going through a grocery store. And so the better ones that I've seen, it will have a sign up on the shelf that says, take 3 cans, or take 2 to 3 cans, or 3 to 4 cans, whatever. And you have a wide variety. And then that way they can choose what they want with a limit as to how much they can get. But it's just a much more dignified process. The same with meats and the same with produce is you give them choice, try to replicate the freedom that they have in the grocery store as much as possible. But that's one of the most effective ways I've seen to eliminate that waste, because they're only going to typically get what they or their family is going to eat. That's
pretty cool. Michael Coleman here, Mission Minded, a show that runs every single Monday through Friday, now 5 days a week, 10 a.m. right here on TKR and Tony Kurre Radio. Download that Tony Kurre Radio app like the tens of thousands of folks have already done that. Of course, you can listen to us wherever you get your Tony Kurre Radio podcast. Anywhere, we're on every major indice out there. And also info@tonykurreradio.net. Leave your emails. Percy and Dothan, this is a really interesting question. and pretty straightforward. She wants to know, if you never received another morsel of food from this day on, how long could the Montgomery Food Bank continue to provide services? I think this will put things in perspective on how things need to continually roll, right, in your world. It continually needs to come in. But how long could you go?
Well, given that we have 35 counties, it would run out. We probably couldn't sustain normal activity for more than a week or two. Maybe let me back up. Maybe a couple of weeks, because you got to understand, we have 80 agencies per week coming to pick up from us, and that could be a load as small as 200 pounds, or it could be 10,000 pounds of food. It all depends on what they ordered. And then we also have, like I said, the 4 PDOs, which are, just think of those as smaller food banks that are not connected with Feeding America. They're actually connected with us, that help us cover these 35 counties. So, food is not quite as plentiful as it was. And so, again, we're trying to utilize those, the space that we have, the food that we have, the food sourcing that we have. And right now we have 4 warehouses. Now, everybody gets a different picture when you mention a warehouse, and some are bigger than others. Some are climate controlled, and some are not. But we just have food constantly coming in. And what really gets a little complex is we'll get a truck from USDA, for instance, and that product has to be, these are commodities given to us, purchased by USDA and given to us to distribute out to the community. That has to be tracked differently. It has to be treated differently. It has to be put in special places. We have a program that's for seniors that comes in. It's also run by the USDA. These are very strict, accountable programs that we have to manage. And then a lot of, and I don't know if the how much our public is aware of this, 40% of our product, like we gave away 26 million pounds of food to those 35 counties last year. Wow. 40% of that product comes from donated goods from national chains such as Walmart, Target, Dollar General, and things like that. Those that are contracted with Feeding America, we get so much product by going around to the different stores, to the distribution centers, and we get pallets of food that they donate to us. And of course, we're not in control of what the store donations are. Sometimes it's really important, like meats. Sometimes it's vegetables. Sometimes it's produce. It just all depends. And so we have to really constantly be working on, when we bring stuff in, sometimes there's a very small shelf life that we have to turn around and get that out into the customer's hands. Sometimes it's got a long shelf life and we can store it and use it for other, but then you've got the whole issues of, taking up space for a long period of time. So we're constantly moving out inventory. But it is a little concern when you look down the road and Feeding America and the USDA is just saying, look, the amount of food available, the availability of excess food is not going to be this year quite what it's been for a number of reasons. And so we just have to make sure that we're making every dollar go as absolutely as far as it can, that our processes are as efficient and as effective as possible, and just nothing. We can't afford anything to go to waste.
info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Send your emails, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can every single week. He's Michael Coleman. You know him, of course, formerly of the Jimmy Hill Mission, now with the Montgomery Food Bank. They're serving 35 counties here, and this is a show that's bigger than the Montgomery Food Bank or the Jimmy Hill Mission. It's about non-for-profits, and we'll take your questions on anything that's non-for-profit or for-profit. We'll talk about businesses as well, and we're going to get into some Adapter Parish, a show that obviously my radio partner does with Dr. Alex Hubeline on Tuesdays, about how you got to change in order to grow. And we'll talk about that in a second. But I do want to get to one more email that I think is really interesting. Tim from Phoenix City, and we talked about a little before we started our show. He was talking about the Ukrainian grain issue, and finally ships now full of grain are getting out, and it was a worldwide effect, certainly in Africa where people plan on grain. And you and I don't typically go to a Publix or a Walmart or a Target and buy a bag of grain, but grain is a part of so many different things. He wanted to know, is there one particular food, grain, something that comes into the Montgomery Food Bank that is just pivotal, is super important as far as an distribution to your customers?
Yeah, so I don't necessarily think it's one particular food. I will tell you from year to year, it seems to be a little bit different emphasis depending on where we're seeing the greatest challenges. So it has been recently on produce, trying to get fresh produce. Lots of times, when we get crates of bananas and things like that, and we all know, we buy a thing of bananas, they're green, we take them home, the next day they're yellow, 2 days later, they got the black spots on them, and then they sit there a week, and that's your banana pudding, because they're so ripe. Yeah. So you imagine those things are going, the Walmarts and all that are going to try to sell as long as they can. They're not going to get rid of them when they're green because they're still, so they give them to us, and we may only have 2 days to turn those things around and try to get those. So fresh produce is a challenge, but I will tell you right now, the emphasis seems to be on protein and meats and healthy meats, lean meats as much as possible. And so that's why our freezer is such a big deal, because if we can get truckloads of it, even some of that we have to pay for that's not donated, we have the capacity to be able to store a good bit. And lots of times, look, that's the whole challenge. I'm getting off that subject just a little bit, but it kind of bleeds into this idea of a challenge. We have agencies all over these counties. So this is wherever you are, wherever you're listening from, you've got these same challenges where you have remote places, and the food bank that's over your county is trying to reach out and create an agency so that there's a pipeline, if you will, of food to those in those remote rural communities who need it the most. And oftentimes the greatest challenge is that they only have what they have. I mean, sometimes 3 people will drive an hour away in their cars, and that's all they can put the groceries for their church to be able to give out to their communities. They don't have huge trailers, and it's not that they can't get more food or wouldn't get more food. They simply just don't have the capacity. They're doing everything they can. So we're actually trying to be very proactive in talking about things like this. Hey, what if we were to let you order whatever you needed to order, and we'll load your orders up and we'll take them to each county, and we'll find like a common distribution point so that we don't have 10 agencies coming to us. We'll come out there and offload in a place which is much easier for y'all to handle. That way you can make multiple trips to pick up your food and you can order more. We're just trying to find, easy solutions to where, because the truth of the matter is we can't distribute it out to the people. We have to go through agencies. So agencies are a vital partner with us in this. And so we're renewing our efforts there to try to just, how do we do this the smartest, most effective way we can? And that's just an ongoing challenge.
Tabitha in Montgomery's got a great question. This is funny because last week I actually tweeted out a picture of this. I found a package of hot dogs in my refrigerator, and the expiration date was June 11th. It was the first time in the history of Tony Curry that I've ever had a hot dog actually expire that was unopened. I could not believe it. And you know what I did? I nuked it and I went for it, man. I was like, it's a flipping hot dog, and people are like, that's good for another 3 years, bro. So do you have she wants to know, do you have an expiration date? Because we obviously know that stores will sell something to a certain time to keep it fresh, but it doesn't mean that it's bad. And you get some of that food because they've got excess of it. And if you do have something that perhaps you're afraid to distribute because it has gone past its expiration date, do you donate that food to anything else? Are there farms that could take that type of food? Is there wild stock that could eat old hot dogs? I don't know. Are there pigs that could eat old food that is not good for human consumption, but for certain animals?
Yeah. So, that is a great question. Well, the USDA prints out a catalog And what they will tell you is on canned, and I'm just gonna use this as an example. It may be canned vegetables. The dates on the cans, sometimes we really mistake that. We say it's good till this date. Well, that's really a sell by date, is not a date of freshness. And the truth of the matter is, with whether you do or don't like preservatives that are put into our food, a can of green beans may be good for a full year past the date. Now, Walmart is not going to sell past the sell by date, but it does not mean that there's anything wrong with the food. So the USDA has inspected all this, and the entire food supply chain has extended life shelf. And so we operate within those, where we take the food that Walmart would just be disposing of and getting rid of. We take that, it is still good. We distribute that within those dates and try to eliminate waste. And yeah, there's all sorts of things. If something happened, that you could get it. We just don't have a lot of that waste, to give out to farmers, like for pigs and stuff like that. But absolutely, I don't want anything to go to waste. I want to reuse anything we can. It's just rare that we have spoiled food because we distribute it so quickly and it doesn't have time to spoil. And the conditions by which we are required to store it, we're very meticulous about this, because the last thing in the world we want is to be responsible for making our clients sick and them lose confidence in the food bank. Yeah. So we are meticulous with our frozen section, our cooler section, our climate control food, and the only thing that goes in a non-climate control warehouse is something that the USDA says does not have to be there. So it's not just bring it all into a warehouse and dump it and turn around. We keep meticulous records. We have reporting requirements. We have safety checks of the organization that does this on a national level. So the Feeding America and the food bank system is a very good system and a very reliable system. Now, is it possible that things happen? Sure, absolutely. There's possible that things slip through the cracks, just like at a grocery store or anywhere else. But I will tell you, I think we do, not just the Montgomery Food Bank, but just Feeding America as a whole does a remarkable job of delivering food that otherwise would go to waste. And we all, well, I'm going to say we all, I don't know how young the audience is. I knew I grew up in that generation that said, hey, you make a happy plate. You got the old speech about there's kids in Africa starving. Mm-hmm. So you make sure you eat everything on your plate. That we don't have the waste. And it's really important, because we do live in a society where everything is throwaway now. The products we make are expected to last a few years or whatever for a certain time, and then we get rid of it. We just throw it away. We move on. We get another one. We really try to do everything we can to care for literally every pound of food and get it out there. And any waste is very, very low. And then even then we try to be responsible with it.
It's Michael Coleman from Mission Mind. We're keeping your mind, your mission, your mind, a show about for-profit, non-for-profit. He, of course, is the CEO of the Montgomery Food Bank. They serve 35 counties here in the great state of Alabama. A fascinating show. And your emails are always welcome here. info@TonyCurryRadio.net, info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Your show runs Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. here on TKR, 10 o'clock in the morning Central Time. And then right after that, we have a show with Dr. Josh Claypo, whom you know, Michael, and, of course, our good friend Dr. Alex Hubline. It's called Adapt or Perish, one of our fastest growing shows as well. And that's about adapting or dying in the digital world. And I know you kind of wanted to get into this change a little bit. Change is real interesting for a lot of different people. It depends on how old you are, where you're at in your life. But for the most part, a lot of people don't like change, period. They like to create the change. They like to change on their own, but they don't want to be told they have to change, even if things aren't going well. Sometimes you stay in an abusive relationship because you're used to it. You know what to expect. You don't want that change because you don't know what's on the other side. So when it comes to change in your business, and certainly with your employees and the people you work with, what's your overall thought on changing for the good?
Well, So I have several thoughts on that, and we can take that over in the next week because we probably don't have enough time to touch on all this. But
Yeah.
first of all, we know change is inevitable. And, my view is it's incumbent upon every leader of an organization, regardless of how many resources you have. I mean, you should always be looking at your processes. You should always be looking at how you're doing things from beginning to end and saying, where can we improve? And sometimes that change does not require any additional funding or anything. You can just do things more efficiently and more effectively. I call it squeezing a little bit more juice out of the grape, And so anytime I've come into a new job like this, it's always a challenge because I'm coming in with fresh eyes. And even going back to issues that were before my predecessor, I'm going to see things that need to be changed and need to be updated. Sometimes the staff has experienced it and said, "Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. We've been wanting to change." And then sometimes you have staffs that go, "I don't see the change." So one of the things that I have found to be most challenging is to come in and learn how and why they're doing it. And then as the leader, asking myself is challenging them and myself to say, is there a better, does this make sense? Are we doing it the best we can? Or can we make a substantial difference? And so usually we go into the analysis process and I'm asking questions and trying to dig down as to the why. And I will tell you, so often when you just keep digging, you inevitably get to the question of, why are we doing it this way? And very rarely have I had somebody say, well, we researched it. I looked through all this, and I'm telling you, I cannot find a better way to do this. That is, matter of fact, I want to say in all my years, I don't know that I've ever heard that. What I do hear is, well, this is the way we've always done it. Or, well, I said I want, 10 years ago, I said we need to do it differently, but so-and-so didn't want to. So the person who had that initial energy and wanted that change just kind of settles in and so what ends up happening is, without changes, everybody just kind of settles in. There's a general apathy. And why that's so destructive is we take our eyes off the people we're serving. So if I came in here and I said, okay, we're just supposed to get food in and get food out, and we're doing that, and let's just keep doing that. But I look at our clients and I see a face. I see a face of somebody that we are not reaching, who is hungry tonight, but we do not have the capacity to reach them. And that drives me to say, what have we got to do differently to reach that person? And so I just cannot accept mediocrity. Now, when I say mediocrity, it cannot be my idea. I have to bring my leadership in and say, let's analyze this, and anything less than excellence, we're not going to settle for. So in other words, I used to say this all the time when I was a soldier, and people have been in government, it's good enough for government work. And, close enough. We can, when you're serving people, especially people who are hungry or not having the nutrition that they need, and have the uncertainty of not knowing where their next meal is, we can't afford mediocrity. We have to be driven to say, yes, this means we've got to change, but if we can do it better, we have to do it better. It's not my way. It's not your way. We have to come together. And that means we're going to have to do some things different. Now, the challenge for me as a leader is looking at my staff, the person who's done it for the last 15 years, and say, is this the person to lead change? Or is this person so complacent now and they're just looking to work their way to retirement or whatever? It doesn't make them a bad person, but it usually means they can't lead the charge on change if they're the ones who, let's just say, have a lot of that apathy or have just kind of settled in. And so I would rather have somebody who's energetic, excited, passionate, but maybe doesn't have the same experience as the other person. I would rather bring that energy in, because that energy is going to push through the problems. Somebody who has general apathy or has done it all they're going to do it, when they hit a roadblock, because they're not bringing any energy to really force them their way through that problem. As soon as they hit a problem, they're typically going to stop. Yeah. And then you've got to go motivate them to change. So, give me a bunch of people who don't know food banking. I'll bring them in there and we'll teach them. But I want them to be passionate about getting food to people and helping those. That's why we're here, not to sit back and just process food. Not that we've been doing it. I'm just saying from a mindset. This is any organization. In the nonprofit world, you exist to help somebody over barriers. And that means you can't allow the barriers themselves to stop you or slow you down. You have to be driven inside to overcome that no matter what it takes.
Michael, great stuff. Let's pick back up on next week. I love when you get all motivated and get all fired up.
Yeah, man, I'm all pumped up. Now I got to go check some things, make sure we're doing what we
Go check that 8,000 square foot freezer you got, brother. Go walk in there and cool off a little bit, my man. Hey, thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up next week, okay?
All right, brother. Appreciate you.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.